What's up, everybody? I hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm Anthony. On today's episode, I want to talk about 7 ways that you can source food without going to a grocery store. But first, the intro. All right, before I get started on the list, I have to say this because I know somebody's probably going to be like, well, what about this? I'm not talking about things like delivery, because I know you can get groceries delivered these days. I'm talking about legit ways that you can source food for your family without having to go to any retail establishment or spend any money. Now, just to let y'all know here at the beginning, there is a reason for this video, there's a reason for this list, and I will tell y'all at the end, so please stay tuned because there is a method to the madness, I promise. Alright, that brings me to my number 1. I'm sitting in the middle of it, and that is going to be growing your own food via a garden. Now, I'm under no delusions. You can't actually grow 100% of your family's needs growing everything without having a large plot of land. Now, there's going to be some books out there that say, oh, you can do it through intensive gardening on a quarter acre. I'm going to call BS on that because you can't. That's going to require way too much work and too much bringing stuff in from the outside. So by having the bigger plots of land, it will only help you be able to grow what you need. However, I can tell you for a fact, on a 20 by 20 garden, I'm able to grow all of my family's vegetable needs throughout the course of the summertime. And ever since I started canning, I haven't had to buy a vegetable that I can't grow in a very, very long time. Sure, I might buy things that I don't grow, but for the most part, when it comes down to simple things like beans, even potatoes, I haven't bought those in a very long time, so just keep that part in mind. That's always an option. Now, when it comes down to growing your own food, you don't just have to be growing vegetables. You can grow things like fruits, growing an orchard. I have tons of fruit trees around here. I'm hoping they produce fully this year, maybe even next year. That way I don't have to worry about buying fruits anymore as well. But being able to grow your own fruits, vegetables, and even, grains are going to be paramount here. But remember, the goal is not to take 100% of your grocery bill and throw it away. The goal at the beginning is always going to be supplementing. And the best way to supplement your grocery bill is to grow your own. So if you have the space, if you have the want, if you want to learn how to do it, then please go ahead and get started. It's one of those things where the more experience you have, the better it's going to be for you. And if you don't know where to start, I will go ahead and put down a few links below in the description that got me started when I first got out of the military, a couple books that helped me out. That way I was able to get started without having to worry about all the headaches that are associated with trying to figure it out yourself. So I will go ahead and put those down below. That way I can help you out. All right, so number 2 is going to be one thing that I thoroughly enjoy doing, and that is going to be hunting. Now, I know not everybody's a hunter, and I understand that, but you can't wipe that off the table when it comes down to getting food, because that is something we've been doing for thousands, tens of thousands of years as a species. So hunting definitely needs to be on the table. Now, depending on where you live, there's going to be different game to hunt, and there's going to be different rules to hunt. Make sure that if you are going to be hunting, you follow all the laws in your state. You don't use a rifle out of season. You don't hunt out of season, because nobody likes a poacher. And make sure that you are hunting safely. If you want to use something like a firearm, please take a safety course before you do, because I don't want to see anybody get hurt because they are walking next to somebody, hear something, pull the trigger, and shoot their buddy next to them, which happens a lot. Dick Cheney. So just make sure that when you are hunting, you're paying attention to all the safety rules. Now, you don't have to do big game. For me, one of my favorite things to hunt out here on my property is going to be white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer are very prolific in the area, and so are wild boar in the lower part of the state where a lot of the farmland is. As a matter of fact, a lot of a lot of landowners will let you come onto their property to take care of the boar problem and basically almost even get paid to hunt for food. So you can't beat you can't beat that. And places like Texas, I know that boars are everywhere, and they are just destroying acres upon acres of farmland. So being able to find them there is almost, I won't say a guarantee, but pretty common. So, but you don't have to worry about hunting things that are big if you don't like big game, or if you don't have the opportunity for big game. You can always hunt things like bird, dove hunting, pheasant. Turkey season's actually coming up. I think turkey season started here a few days ago on private lands. I'm not much of a turkey hunter, but I will be at some point. But you can also do things like small game. Rabbit, squirrel, raccoon, all good eating. A lot of, you can almost find them everywhere. I guarantee I can walk in there and find like 15 squirrels. So it's not like you can't find them. And then we do make a really good meal. So if you are in a neighborhood, don't feel like you can't go hunting. You can always go to your local public land WMA, because I don't know all the states, but I know my state has wildlife managed areas, WMAs, that are managed by the Department of Natural Resources to make sure that you can go hunting. There is different rules for a WMA versus public property or private property, but it's not too bad. You just can't hunt like Sundays, and the seasons are different in terms of like gun, archery, primitive weapon, that kind of thing. So, but please, if you are considering putting food on your own table, the best type of food, in my opinion, please go hunting. All right, so that brings me to my number 3, and that is going to be fishing. Please do not take this for granted. It's one of those things where I guess we all grow up. Some of us, if we grow up fishing, then that's one thing. But if you never have fished before, you might look at it like, I don't know what to do at all. But when it's the middle of summertime here, you can literally put a cork on a line with a hook and a worm, and you're going to catch something. May not be immediately, but if you put it in the lake long enough, you're going to catch some form of sunfish. So please do not knock having the ability to go fishing. One of my absolute favorite things to fish for is going to be catfish. It's one thing I'm naturally good at, as you can see from yesterday. Look at that. That's a big boy. Big old cat. He's croaking at me too. Here. This is dinner. But not everybody has the opportunity to get things like catfish. If you are in a colder area, please absolutely take advantage of the trout season. I can't get trout here, it's just too hot. So I'm forced to do things like cats or crappie, bass, those kind of things. But fishing is definitely one of those things that takes a lot of practice to get really good at. Not to mention it takes a lot of blind luck. But you have to know what you're doing. You have to know the seasons that you can fish. You have to know when they spawn, that kind of thing, to know a good idea of what they're actually going to eat. So by knowing what you're fishing for or what kind of fish are in your area, that's only going to help you in the long run. So please do not knock the idea of fishing to be able to put food on your family's table. One thing I got to make sure I repeat, because it is so important when it comes to fishing, please make sure that you have a fishing license and you know the regulations in your area. Depending on if you are ocean or lake, it doesn't really make a difference. DNR, Department of Natural Resources, whoever the game warden is, will not let you off by saying, I didn't know. That's one of those things that people automatically assume if it's their first time, hey, I can get away, I just didn't know. That is no excuse for not knowing the rules. If you are fishing off the coast, especially in South Carolina, catch something like a red snapper or a saltwater catfish and you keep it, wow, you're going to be in some trouble. And you don't need that kind of thing, especially if it comes down to feeding your family. You don't want to be fined, stuck in jail, or lose your license because you didn't know the regulations. So please, before you start fishing, make sure you got the rules or the rule book and make sure you have a license. All right, now that brings me to my number 4, and that's going to be raising your own livestock. Now, I know when I say raising your own livestock, you automatically probably think of the old American farm, so having things like cows, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, that kind of thing. You can do those, there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of them require some space. So things like cows require a lot of acreage because you have to rotationally graze them or they'll completely eat the grass down to nothing. And you have to give them a lot of supplemental feed for the wintertime when there is no grass, and that can get kind of expensive. So cows might be off the list for a lot of people, especially because of space requirements. However, you can do things in smaller areas like goats, pigs, chickens that don't require a lot of space. And I know some places, like some neighborhoods, you can have things like chickens. Now, a lot of homeowners associations, the communist homeowners associations say, hey, no, you can't have any animals here and your grass is to be this cut at all times and no weeds, blah, 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 blah. But some places are pretty cool about that. And if you can find one that allows you to have chickens even, then you can get along with those. So before I bought my house, I lived in a neighborhood and I had 3 chickens. No one knew about it. I didn't have a rooster, so no one was, none the wiser, so everything was cool. But some places you can't do that, but most places are becoming a little bit more understanding and allowing you to have them. Now, another thing you could possibly have would be rabbits. During World War II, the federal government said, hey, everybody, you start getting some rabbits because rabbits reproduce like rabbits. They reproduce pretty quickly. So you can get a really good source of meat fairly fast if you have rabbits. They make a lot of big litters, and all those can make their own litter. So before you know it, you could have tons of rabbits. Just know that if you do get rabbits, they require some climate, certain things for the climate. They can overheat pretty quickly, and they can freeze pretty quickly. So you have to understand those aspects depending on where you are, or you'll lose them. But when I mention livestock, I'm not necessarily talking about mammals or birds. You can get things even smaller than those. Things like bees, Bees are considered livestock, and they make honey. Honey is extremely valuable. You can also think even smaller than that. Things like mealworms, regular worms like night crawlers, crickets. All that stuff can be done in a very small area. If you live in an apartment or a condo, you can have things like minnows, have small fish, even small tubs to make, aquaponic, hydroponic systems where you can have tilapia. They don't require a lot of space, and you could do that indoors, so you don't need to have land to be able to do them. The best part about having things like worms or crickets is you can almost get a twofer out of them, because yeah, you can eat them if need be, or you can use them to catch fish. So use something small to catch something bigger, or you can feed them to chickens and cut your feed bill. So when I say livestock, I'm not necessarily talking about cows all the time. I could say things just like that, very, very, very small. So don't knock it, think about it, because in your area you might be able to have something that can be very beneficial for very cheap, and it'll knock off a good amount of money from your grocery bill. Okay, so number 5, foraging. A lot of people don't understand how lucrative this can actually be. Depending on your area, you can actually find a lot of food foraging during certain times of the year. Now, springtime is when all the wild edibles start popping up from the ground before people start cutting lawns, so you can easily get things like plantain, dandelion, dead nettle, that kind of thing, chickweed, and all that stuff's going to work great for a salad. But when it comes down to midsummer, you can probably walk through the woods and find some form of berry to eat. For me, here in South Carolina, there are blackberries everywhere in the middle of May and June. So if I want to just walk through, I can find a whole bunch of blackberries. That is going to supplement my fruit needs. Now, another thing is during October, I can find pecans, hickory nuts, walnuts, and acorns. Oaks are everywhere, acorns are everywhere. That is a free source of food that I can just find off the ground. Just keep in mind, if you want to forage, please pay attention to what you're actually grabbing. There's a lot of things that look alike. Make sure that you have a couple books so you can look through and read and find out exactly what you're looking at. Make sure you identify positively, because if you aren't positive, don't eat it. There's a lot of lookalikes out there. You don't want to be stuck thinking that you're eating Queen Anne's lace, wild carrot, and you're eating something that's deadly. Another thing I want to mention is mushrooms. I wouldn't even trust books when it comes to mushrooms. I would only trust being with somebody that knows exactly what they're talking about, because mushrooms throughout different life cycles can look similar to something else. So between juvenile and adult mushrooms, they can look like completely different mushrooms. And as you all know, one bite from a wrong mushroom can legitimately kill you. So I definitely would not mess with mushrooms unless someone actually took me out and showed me who knew exactly what they were talking about. So I'll put a couple resources down below for foraging. There's one book for me called Southeast Foraging that works out very well. But you can also use the U.S. Army Survival Manual. They also have a good section on what's edible and what's not. Again, I'll put those down below. Number 6 is going to be something like trapping. Now, when I mention trapping, I'm not necessarily just talking about things like mammals or fur bearers. There are other types of trapping, like things in the water, crab pot, lobster pot, trot line. Those are all considered traps because you are walking away. That's why trapping is so effective, because you can set the trap, multiple traps, walk away and do something else. That's the whole point of doing it. You cannot actively hunting or fishing. You are literally doing a passive form of gathering food. You can set everything, walk away, come back and see if you caught something. So that's why it's very good. However, again, just like with hunting and fishing, there usually is trapping season. There is usually regulations to require that. Make sure that you're paying attention to all the laws in your area, so again, you're not getting fined or potentially put in jail because you did something wrong out of season. Alright, so that brings me to my 7th and final, and that is going to be bartering. I know some of y'all are probably thinking, really, bartering? Yes. Have you ever helped a friend move for pizza and beer? Congratulations, you just traded your labor for food and beer. But we've been doing that for a very long time as a society. Think about back in the early 1900s and maybe 1800s, the entire town would help harvest, and then by doing so, they would keep some of the food. That's like sharecropping. Things like grist mills existed. If you don't know what a grist mill is, it's where they would bring all the grains with the two stones that would grind the grains together. Well, that mill would take payment usually in the form of the ground grains. So 20% of the grains would be for the mill, and then you would walk away with the rest. Congratulations, you've just traded your food for labor. So it can work both ways. I know way back when apple pies were very, very common because it was a cheap way to feed your farmhands. Farmhands would come and you would feed them, obviously, because even though you are paying them, you still needed to feed them on the job. So trading work for labor is one of those things. Work for food is one of those things that we've been doing for a long time, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. So if you have the option now, say you have some chickens, say you have dairy animals, I would go ahead and start setting up those relationships while you can, because even if something doesn't happen to our currency, it's still nice to avoid the tax man by just being able to barter. So definitely think of that as a way to source some food. All right, so there you have it. That is my list. Those are some of the ways that you can source food without having to go to a grocery store. Now, there is, again, a reason why I'm doing this video, a method to the madness, if you will, why I'm mentioning this right now, and I can give you a couple of reasons off the bat. Number one, our money is becoming worthless. Inflation is not coming, inflation is already here. When they signed this recent relief bill, they just created almost $2 trillion more to add to the system. That means that all the money that you may have in your bank account is now worth less because they just printed $2 trillion more. Every time you go to the grocery store, you're gonna notice, just like I do, that things cost more money. I can tell you, like 3 years ago, I would go to the grocery store and I remember paying like $120 for a trip. Now I get virtually the same stuff and it costs me up to $150, $160. I feel like my grocery bill has increased 30% over just the course of a few years. So again, I'll say it, inflation's not coming, inflation is here. And another thing that you want to add is the fact that energy prices are also going up. When energy prices go up, that means that everything else that gets shipped via using energy like gasoline is going to cost more money. So if something costs more money to be shipped, if something costs more money to have brought in via boat, whatever, it's going to cost you more money. So that is another reason why you have to pay attention to your grocery bill. So being able to source food away from the grocery store will only help you. Now, one more thing I wanted to add is the fact that a lot of farmland has been bought up by corporations. And during this recent pandemic, we've seen a massive fall or fail of family-owned businesses. That includes farms, stores, that kind of thing. So what do you think is going to happen when family farms are gone? Corporations are going to run the show, which they basically are already doing now. When corporations run the show, they can basically set prices to push you into buying a certain thing. That's just the way the world works. You can see recently how they just did a price fixing with chicken. That stuff happens. Congress doesn't do anything about it. And who is stuck to foot the bill? We are, the average consumer. So when things like corporate taxes raise, you think the corporations are going to sit there and say, hey, let's take less of a profit? No, that's going to come down to you, the consumer. So everything's going to get more and more expensive. So being able to source your own food will help, give you a buffer between the price fixing or the prices raising from all these different things, all these different variables going on in the world. So if you can take one of these, two of these, three of these, however many, to help bring more food to your family without having to pay for it, please do that. So tell me down below, how many of these things do you actually do? Do you do 1, 2, 3, 4? Maybe all 7. Hopefully you do enough of them to where you can help, again, insulate your wallet, your bill from going up so high and take care of your family. But I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you appreciate my hard work. If you did, please do me a humongous favor and give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one, okay?